Welcome in, everybody. Monday afternoon edition, Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Frankly, I do hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. I hope everybody's getting ready for a Happy New Year. So this is the first official show that we have done since last Monday, last full show. We've done some clips on the YouTube channel, etc., but it has been a quiet couple days in sports. We kind of did the reaction to the first round of the college football playoff. Then we went dark. And so now we are back here on a Monday to break down the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. Cannot believe we are here and we got ourselves a loaded show. So this is what we're going to do today on a Monday. First off, the show schedule this week will probably not go live again until Thursday after the full college football playoff quarterfinals are done. But bottom line is today, this is what we're going to talk about because we got a jam-packed show. We are going to do our official second round college football playoff picks. We are going to talk about this very interesting Leonard Hamilton story. Did you see this? Florida State back in the news, back in the courtroom as 5 former players are suing Florida State over unpaid NIL. So it is a crazy situation there. And then we'll wrap with this. We are now basically at the midway point of college basketball. League play really is going to ramp up over the next couple days. Everybody will be playing league games by Saturday. And so what I want to do, I want to give you the 10 biggest stories in college football college basketball, heading into 2025. Obviously, we're going to really ramp up our college basketball coverage here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. I've been watching everything. I've been monitoring everything. And after Wednesday, we are down to 3 college football playoff games, 2 semifinals, and a final. Once that happens, we are full speed ahead with college hoops. So we will give you the biggest storylines heading into 2025. Before we get started, a couple quick things. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day on YouTube. And of course, we go live here multiple times a week. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And also, make sure to rate and review the show as well. Should mention, by the way, really quick before we get to our great friends with Colli Puffs, if you are interested in advertising with the Aaron Torres Pod, hit me up at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. As we come to a close in 2024, the numbers that we have done are through the roof. Okay, so first of all, thank you to all of you who have supported this show, who have listened to the show, who have downloaded on podcast, who have watched on Apple, or who have watched on YouTube, who have watched through Twitter. Appreciate your support. If you are a company, big or small, whatever, we want to work with you. We're going to have some interesting advertising opportunities in the new year. We'll get some new studio space, I'm hoping for, in the coming month or so. So hit me up, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Even if you're just curious how it will work, what do I have to do? How long do I have to commit for? Just hit me up. We'll work together. We'll work with you. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. And speaking of great partners, I want to welcome back for the final time in 2025, our good friends, our buddies. Yeah, you're right. Torres is talking Colli Puffs. Okay, so it's the holiday season. It's that time of year. Everybody's at home. You're on the couch. You've been watching bowl games nonstop. You got New Year's Eve college football. You got New Year's Day college football, college basketball. You're looking for a healthy but delicious snack to munch on while you're watching all these games sitting on the couch. Well, people, that is where my friends Colli Puffs come in. Okay, family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge football fan, and basically Joey's no different than you and I. Was sitting on the couch one day trying to think and come up with a snack that is delicious but healthy, something that he could eat while he's watching football, something that his kids could eat that would obviously be healthy for them as well. And that's where he came up with Colli Puffs. These are the alternative to all the crap in your grocery aisle. They're baked, not fried, healthy ingredients, avocado oil, no grease. And here's the crazy part. I've been telling you for months about Colli Puffs. Guess what? You don't have to take my word for it at this point. You can go ahead and try them out for yourself. All you got to do, go visit collipuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Or you can try them out for yourself on Amazon. So they are available on Amazon. You got a full cart as it is, throw some Colli Puffs in. Just search Colli Puffs. You'll be able to find them there. Throw them into your cart on Amazon. They will get delivered right to your house. They will not disappoint. Tell them Torres sent you. We appreciate Colli Puffs for their support of the Aaron Torres pod. With that said, it is a Monday in late December, the final episode of 2024. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, we have not done a live show since last Monday, coming off of the first round of the college football playoff. Wasn't much to discuss as Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame dominate. But now it's time to look ahead. And like I said, we could have done shows last week, but it felt like the discourse on college football is a little angry. Kirk Herbstreit yelling about everything. It's the holidays. We're supposed to be cheerful. So with that said, let's dive in and let's preview the 4 college football playoff games going forward. Should mention, by the way, we obviously have the college football betting pod and the college football betting YouTube channel. We broke all these games down in deep form on Sunday into Monday. So if you're not subscribed to the college football betting feed, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, also a separate YouTube channel from the Aaron Torres pod. Would love if a couple of you would go over there and subscribe there as well. With that said, let's get into the games. And listen, we could go in chronological order. Last week we went in chronological order. Today, though, I want to dive into the games that I think everybody is most intrigued by, and we'll kind of work our way backwards. So let's start with the big one, 5 p.m. Eastern. New Year's Day. I am talking about the Rose Bowl. How about this? Number 8, Ohio State, a 2.5-point favorite over the number 1 seeded Oregon Ducks. The over-under set at 55.5. And listen, as I look at this game, a couple things stand out. First of all, the discourse about how the bracket broke, that's all going to get figured out. There's already reports that basically by next year, those 4 teams that are conference champions might not get auto buys. So Oregon will not be in this position, or whoever's the number 1 seed in this position going forward. But what I will say is this is a great game. These 2 teams already played a thriller, and it's also kind of worth noting this. This shows, listen, I'm seeing people say like, oh, this is like the de facto national championship. I'm not there yet, but it shows just how good this Ohio State team is. They were a touchdown plus favorite against Tennessee. Now they are a favorite over the number 1 seeded Oregon Ducks. And let me start by saying this, okay? When I look at this game, a couple things stand out. One, first off, we got to give credit Ryan Day. Listen, I said it on the last full episode that we did. If we're going to criticize Ryan Day for all the losses to Michigan, the poor performance a few weeks ago, I thought that a few weeks ago, against the Tennessee Volunteers, I think you could argue that was the best performance of Ryan Day's career. Okay, they came out, they dominated, but you know what the most important thing about that game was? They threw the freaking ball to their playmakers, specifically Jeremiah Smith. I think the fact that they went to Jeremiah Smith, that they actively sought him out on the opening drive, that tells you that Ryan Day was listening to the noise, listening to the criticism, knew that he had to feed his guys and feed his stars. He does just that. Jeremiah Smith scores the opening touchdown. Jeremiah Smith finishes with 6 catches for 103 yards. Ohio State ran the football. Ohio State threw the football. Ohio State was dominant on defense as Tennessee finishes with about 250 yards of total offense and 100 yards passing. This was a complete effort. From the Oregon side of things, listen, you know about this team. There's no new data point since the Big Ten championship game. But the one thing I will say, I do think the Big Ten championship game was interesting. Penn State was able to run the ball close to 9 yards per carry. That's certainly interesting coming into this game. But also, I do think that that was a game where, listen, I think that maybe people are overreacting a little bit to Oregon's defense from that game. And I do think this is a game where they've had a month to prepare. They know Ohio State well. And as we look back at that first game, I think that's also a game from both Oregon and Ohio State side of things. I don't think there's a ton to take away from it. You look at that game, and it was just a back and forth, awesome game. Both defenses, have elite talent, and neither defense could get the other offense off the field. Oregon does win a close game, but that was a game both teams had over 450 yards of offense. It was a game where, look, we all know the situation. Jeremiah Smith pass interference call late in the game that could have the refs could have held the flag. They didn't need to throw the flag there. If that pass interference call isn't made, Ohio State lines up for an easy field goal. Then, of course, on the final play of the game, Will Howard drops back, doesn't get down in time. So again, I don't think that there's like some amazing takeaway from that first game other than that both teams are elite. We're seeing it in this game. Let's get to my official pick for the Rose Bowl, 5 p.m. Eastern. Ohio State is a 2.5-point favorite. I'll tell you this. I like Oregon plus the 2.5, and I like Oregon to win outright in the Rose Bowl, which is technically an upset, even though it probably shouldn't be, as Oregon is the number 1 seed. There's a couple reasons, and this isn't a tear down Ryan Day thing. But I will say, like, I found it kind of interesting how quickly the discourse immediately changed on Ryan Day, right? Like think about 24 hours before that Ohio State-Tennessee game. It was all about, oh my God, Ryan Day's terrible. He shouldn't have this job. Stephen A. Smith saying, hire Deion Sanders. And then they beat Tennessee, and it immediately defaults to, oh, they're back. They're the best team in college football. Let's just push all of our chips in the middle on the Buckeyes, okay? Listen, Ohio State being favored in this game, I think speaks to the talent on this roster. But I'm not sold that just because they flipped a switch in one game, that means that they are immediately the overwhelming favorite to win it all, okay? Think about Ohio State. First of all, Ryan Day, I'll give him credit for this. In games in which his back is truly against the wall and nobody really believes in him, that's generally when Ryan Day performs his best as the Ohio State head coach. This is a guy, remember, in the 2020 COVID season, Ohio State makes the playoff. They've only played 4 or 5 games. They're playing Clemson. They had lost to Clemson in the playoff before, and everybody's like, Ohio State doesn't even belong there. What happens? Ryan Day comes in. Ohio State is prepared. Ohio State beats the brakes off of Clemson in that game. 2022, remember, that was the second year that they lost to Michigan. That was the year they got into the college football playoff as a 4 seed. Nobody gave them a chance against Georgia. Boom, they play Georgia. They're in control of the game. Marvin Harrison gets hit over the middle, gets a concussion. They end up losing. If Marvin Harrison doesn't get hurt, they probably win. And even then, remember, there was a play late in the game where if they kick a field goal as time expires, they go to the national championship game. So Ryan Day has been good in these situations. He was great a few weeks ago against Tennessee. But I think it's also worth noting, this is a program that has ebbs and flows under Ryan Day. Go back to the first Oregon game. You lose by a point. You have guys like me saying, you know what? I got to give Ryan Day credit. That was a game that could have gone either way. A couple goals go against him, whatever. Then what happens? They immediately come out and play the worst game to that point of the season, nearly losing to Nebraska at home. And remember, Nebraska had gotten destroyed by Indiana the week before. Speaking of Indiana, remember, Ohio State plays Indiana. They're a top 5 team at the time. Late in the season, they destroy Indiana. Will Howard's doing the coach sig, putting out the sig, right? Then they lose to Michigan. And so I'm just not sold that this is a team and a program that's going to put together 4 great games in a row. I just don't believe that's going to happen. And the other thing too, I think Oregon, I think it's not that we're overselling how dominant Ohio State's defense was against Tennessee, but let's be honest, Tennessee's offense was a little bit limited by the end of the year, wasn't it? Dylan Sampson was hurt in that game. The running game is basically non-existent. Tennessee, I think, frankly, even Tennessee fans will tell you the receiver core wasn't great. Nico in a big spot falls behind. You put all the weight on him. He's got to throw the ball pretty much nonstop from about the middle of the first quarter on. I'm sorry, it was a situation that was set up for Ohio State, especially at home. And so now you're on a neutral field. There's obviously going to be a ton of Buckeyes fans there, a ton of Oregon fans there. And I just don't think things are going to go as smoothly early for Ohio State. So in this game, I will take Oregon to win, Oregon to cover. I'm already going long here. I was planning on doing like 3 minutes per game on each of these games. I'll say, I think I said on the college football betting show, I think I said Oregon 31, Ohio State 28. Listen, I still think it's going to be close. I still think it's going to be competitive. I still think it's going to be fun. I just don't think this is a game that Ohio State looks like they did against Tennessee. I will take Oregon to win this game. Let's keep it going. Late night game. Oh, this is going to be a doozy. I'll tell you this, like the Oregon-Ohio State game is getting so much hype, justifiably so. That Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia, Ooh, baby, that should be a good one. Georgia enters this game as a 1.5-point favorite. The over-under in that one is set at 45.5. That number is actually coming down. Listen, when I think about this game, a couple things stand out. First of all, Notre Dame, really interesting. We kind of just know who they are at this point, right? Great defense. They don't even try to throw the ball, 91st in pass attempts this year. And I know they didn't play the best competition over the course of the season. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that they did, but I do think it's worth noting that secondary was awesome and that secondary was elite all season long. This is a team that when you look at the totality of their season, their defense, especially in the secondary, was phenomenal, as this was the number 3 pass defense in college football. This was a team that was second in interceptions with 18, basically forced as many turnovers as anybody in college football. So I think the defense is really good. And then from the Georgia side of things, it's obvious the big question becomes, what do you get out of Gunnar Stockton in his first career start? We all know the deal. Carson Beck is out for this game. Carson Beck is out for the playoff. Carson Beck is out going forward, and he has actually declared for the NFL draft. So he ain't coming back. He ain't walking through that door, okay? Gunnar Stockton in his first career start is going up against an elite secondary. And I think my bigger picture concern is I'm not sold that the run game is going to be able to help them because Georgia, has not been able to run the ball all year. You know, Georgia's ranked like 100th nationally in rush offense. And when I look at Georgia, let me just say this. My official pick for this game, I'll be quicker on this one than the Ohio State-Oregon game. I like Notre Dame to win, and I like Notre Dame to cover. And the reason why is pretty straightforward. Is one, I just don't like the matchup for Georgia. You are going to have to you're going to have to put the ball in the hands of a player making his first career start against the best secondary that Georgia has probably faced all year outside of Texas. I know Gunnar Stockton was fine against Texas, but I'm not sold that over the course of 60 minutes, he is going to be able to control that game and not make a crucial mistake at the wrong time. The run game, I don't think is going to be able to help him because that run game has been inconsistent all year. And when I look at Georgia, I think that to me is the bigger issue in this game is when you look at Georgia, just think about Georgia. I think we all do this, and I talked about this on the College Football Betting Show. I think we're all a little guilty of you just tend to look at the most recent thing that you saw and assume that that's the way that it's always been. That's not the case for Georgia. Georgia has been up and down all year, and I think because people saw them win the SEC championship game, they think, oh, they're going to roll past Notre Dame. Well, remember, a game before that, they easily could have lost to Georgia Tech at home. I know that Georgia has certainly been tested. They played Clemson. They played at Ole Miss, at Alabama, Texas twice, including once on the road. But think about the peaks and flows of their season. Easily could have lost to Kentucky. Easily could have lost to Georgia Tech at home. This is a flawed team. I know they've had time off. I like Notre Dame to win. I like Notre Dame to cover. I'll say another close one, another low-scoring one, 21-17, 21-20, a Notre Dame win. I think it'd set up an interesting conversation if they do win. By the way, I should mention, I will be on Fox Sports Radio from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on New Year's Day. So we will have the full post game of this game and of the full college football playoff. Make sure you're tuned in. Really quickly, the other two games, let's go to the Peach Bowl. That is, of course, the first game on Wednesday, New Year's Day in the college football playoff. Texas, a 12.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 51.5. I actually like the under of 51.5 in this one. Let me explain. First of all, from the Arizona State side of things, listen, they're a great story, but the one thing that stands out to me about Arizona State that I don't think gets talked about enough, Kenny Dillingham, yes, is a young coach. That is a team that plays like their coach is like a 70-year-old guy. They run the football. They take care of the football. They don't beat themselves. Like, I think sometimes when we think of these young guys, we just think it's gunslinging, it's this, it's that, it's aggressive, it's whatever. I mean, Kenny Dillingham coaches, again, like a 60-year-old in the NFL. And you look at what they do. They take care of the football. Tied for second nationally in fewest turnovers. They top 10 in turnover margin. They have a top 25 rush offense. Top 15 in time of possession. And so I think they are going to be able to limit a struggling Texas offense. Quinn Ewers has not looked great. I know he was fine against Clemson. That Clemson defense is not very good, okay? So I think they'll be able to limit the Texas offense. But conversely, I'm just not sold that that Arizona State is going to be able to move the ball at all against Texas. Okay. We saw how great that run defense is, how great that entire defense is against Clemson. I mean, late in the game, Clemson, there was a couple plays they just needed to pick up a yard or two, could not get it. That Texas defense is elite. So I'm going to say Texas wins this game. I'll say somewhere in the neighborhood of 24-14, but I think this game is really low scoring. I think Arizona State equates itself well. I just don't know how they find the end zone against this Texas defense. So I have Arizona State winning. Really quickly, the first game, which is, of course, New Year's Eve, rocking New Year's Eve with James Franklin. Let's talk about that one, and let's talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions as they are an 11.5-point favorite the last I saw against Boise. The over-under in this game is set at 55.5, and I'll just be quick on this one. I think Penn State wins and Penn State covers. Listen, Boise is a great story, and this isn't they don't belong, they're over this, they're overrated, they're whatever. It's just like, I just don't know against that Penn State defense if Ashton Jeanty is going to be able to break off those big runs. And I don't know if Maddox Madsen, the quarterback, is ready for this stage and ready for that defense. Boise's run defense is pretty good, but the pass defense is shaky. And I just think you look at Penn State. I mean, think about Penn State. Yes, they played Oregon 3 weeks ago, so it's not like they're not beat up. But that SMU game was basically a game it was a playoff game, but they got up so quickly that I just don't think there was a lot of wear and tear on their bodies, and you could kind of use that game almost as a tune-up for Boise State. So I think Penn State wins. I think they dominate on New Year's Eve. If you're hosting people on New Year's Eve, the good news is I think you could turn off that game early. You could go from James Franklin to Ryan Seacrest, baby, because I think you're going to have plenty of time to flip that game off and get the focus on the game on the New Year's Eve party, because I think this one could be over early. I'll say Penn State 31, Boise 14. I think it gets ugly. So my official picks, I have Oregon, Notre Dame, Texas, and Penn State advancing to college football's first Final Four of the 12-team playoff era. And then as far as my best bets, I have Oregon plus 2.5 money line. I have Notre Dame plus 1.5 in the money line. I have the Texas, Arizona State under of 51.5. And I also have Penn State minus 11.5 in the Fiesta Bowl. All right, so what we're going to do, take a quick break, come back. When we come back, we got to talk. Did you see this story on Monday from Ross Dellinger? Florida State. It's always something at Florida State. They are being sued by 6 former basketball players over unpaid NIL. We'll come back, talk about this crazy story, and then I do want to look ahead to college hoops 2025. We are here. And I just want to talk about the biggest storylines in the sport going into 2025. We'll take a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. A little bit of a quiet Monday here on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Make sure to drop your thoughts, your questions, your comments, all that good stuff. But I do want to switch gears. By the way, I did drop our college football betting YouTube page. That's where all of our deep dive previews are. Make sure you're subscribed to that page as well. College football betting with Aaron Torres. We really do appreciate your support. With that said, let's keep the conversation going. And I do want to switch gears to one of the crazier stories that I think I've really sort of ever seen, but I think it's also a microcosm of where we are in college sports in 2024, heading into 2025. Did you see this story? That Florida State, it's always something with Florida State. I used to do when I used to write more, I used to have a saying, it's always something at Tennessee, because Tennessee, there was like a 7-8 year period where craziness was going on all the time. Well, it's always something at Florida State. They're back in court. This time, they're not suing the ACC. But Florida State, according to a report from Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports on Monday morning, Florida State is being sued. Now, I take that back. Leonard Hamilton, the head coach of Florida State, is being sued by 6 former players. This is a wild story. It is over unpaid NIL money. So let's go ahead and dive in, because it speaks to the craziness of college sports, the craziness of college sports in 2024. And we got to dive into this one because I find it fascinating. So listen, I could beat around the bush and try to give you a million little notes on this story. I think the easiest way to break it down, I'm just going to read straight from Ross Dellinger's report. Ross is great at what he does. He's actually been on this show as a guest once before. He was awesome. And he is, he's a great college sports insider. He does all these deep dive investigative reports. And he put out a report Monday, essentially, that Leonard Hamilton, the Florida State basketball coach, is being sued by 6 former players, all on last year's team, over unpaid NIL, and that the team actually boycotted a practice and had to be talked out of boycotting the Duke game on February 17th. Can you imagine if they just didn't show up for the Duke game, national TV, and the game just doesn't get played over unpaid NIL? Well, that's where we are. I'm just going to read to you directly from the Ross Dellinger report. It is a long piece, so I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs here. All right, this is it. Here we go. 6 former Florida State players filed a lawsuit Monday against their former coach, Leonard Hamilton, over unpaid promises of NIL compensation that total more than $1.5 million, and acknowledged within documents that they boycotted a practice last year over missed payments. It continues. The 6 plaintiffs, Darren Green, Josh Nickelberry, Primo Spears, Cameron Fletcher, Kentucky fans, you may remember that name, Deontay Green, and Jalen Worley, allege that Hamilton promised each of them $250,000 in NIL payments from the coach's, quote, business partners. The players never received the payments, despite Hamilton promising the money to each member of the 23-24 team in 2 separate meetings, as well as in individual conversations with some players and their families. Several players transferred to Florida State under the assurance that they would receive the money. As evidence of NIL promises, the complaint includes multiple text message exchanges among players, between players and Hamilton, and between players and Will Cowan, an executive with one of Florida State's NIL collectives. It goes on. There's a bunch from the Will Cowan, who's part of the collective. I'll read part of a text from the piece. It says, quote, "This is from the NIL collective to players. I'm busting my butt every day for you guys. I'm meeting with the top donor in the entire booster organization Friday after trying to get us a little bit more each day. Crossing my fingers that I can shake loose at least 10 for you," Cowan said, presuming that means $10,000. And so again, this is a very long report, but I think it is worth reading from your time. And I think it is also worth having a deeper conversation about the state of NIL in college sports in 2024. And I think that's what I want to go ahead and do now. Listen, we can talk about all the different variables, but to me, what this speaks to, and I think everybody knows where I'm going, it speaks to just how crazy NIL is in 2024 in college sports heading into 2025. And a couple things stand out when I read this report, okay? The first thing that stands out, it's craziness, but it's not just always player driven, right? Because I think the players in some cases get a little bit of a bad rap, right? You hear all these stories. Oh, it's unregulated free agency. It's unregulated transfers. It's a situation where the players can just leave anytime they want. There's no contract. A player can, agree to a deal with a certain school, and then a day later agree to a different deal. There's nothing. There's no regulation. What I think this also shows, it's kind of crazy from the coaching and administrative side as well. You wouldn't believe, like you see these numbers in the portal. There's 10,000 players or whatever the number is. There's, I think, well over 2,000 players in the football transfer portal. I think basketball got to about 1,500 last year. And I think the assumption is always all 1,500 players in the basketball portal or all 2,000 in the football portal, whatever it is. Well, they're all just basically trying to get more money from somewhere else. That's certainly the case for a lot of them. But for a lot of them, they're at a place where they didn't get paid. They're at a place, obviously there's playing time stuff, this and that, but they're at a place that they didn't get paid. The coach forces them out. I was told of a major program, like I'm talking about a team that was in the college football playoff, right now. I'm one of the 12 teams in the college football playoff. And basically, after the playoff, they have to go ahead and cut guys from their team. Basically, they have to send 10, 15 guys in the portal because they're like, we have made certain commitments to certain guys. You're not good enough. You're not living up to your end of the bargain. We don't care if you want to stay or not. You got to go. So first off, what this says to me, it is chaotic, but it is chaotic on both sides of the argument. It is chaotic on both sides of the spectrum. Yes, the players deserve their fair share of blame. Yes, unregulated free agency every single year is not a great thing, but part of it is on the administrative side as well. Part of it is the administrations are struggling to raise the money that's promised in the offseason. Listen, again, I won't give specifics, but I was talking to a different person who runs a collective, and that person basically told me every single, January 1, February 1, October 1, whatever, I wake up trying to figure out how am I going to raise money to pay these bills by the end of the month. And, this person told me, again, it's a source, it's anonymous, whatever, but basically told me hey, we always find a way. We always get the job done. We've never missed a payment. We're proud of it, this and that. Who knows the truth? But this is something that's going on everywhere. Okay. There isn't a school in America that feels great about where NIL is and that they have enough money. I'm telling you, man. I mean, look at the whole situation at Ohio State. This was a few weeks ago. We were talking about they can't fire Ryan Day because they got to pay the players $20 million next. The roster was $20 million this year. They're going to have to pay through the school next year. And so they can't afford to fire Ryan Day, even if they wanted to. Where are they going to come up with $38 million for his buyout on top of paying the players? So a lot of these schools just simply don't have money. Florida State, it's worth noting, Mike Norvell took a major haircut in large part because basically they weren't going to be able to raise the money to pay their players this year if he wants a competitive roster. And so Mike Norvell was basically, I'm going to give up millions of my salary because if I don't, I'm getting fired after this year. So that's one. Two, couple other thoughts on this story. And this is talked about a lot in the story is basically these players are learning the hard way, man. And this is something I think every person on this planet learns at some point in their lives. A handshake agreement, a verbal agreement is not legally binding. And this is something I continue to be amazed by in this NIL world is the number of guys who either have bad agents, don't have agents at all, and think that a verbal agreement is an agreement. To me, listen, we said it earlier. If you want to advertise on the pod, shoot me an email, Aaron Torres podcast questions @gmail.com. But whether you want to advertise $1,000 or $100,000, we're getting it in writing to protect both of us, right? And so to me, I understand there are legally limitations on what can be put in writing with these quote unquote NIL contracts, but you got to get something in writing. Players can do that even under the current NCAA guidelines. And I think what it speaks to is if you're a young man, if you're a parent, by the way, we have parents all over the country that watch this show that love college sports, make sure everything's in writing because if it isn't, it doesn't matter what the coach promised you. It doesn't matter what the coach agreed to you. By the way, I found it interesting. There's no text proof. Leonard Hamilton did not have any digital proof. Basically, even backtrack. Leonard Hamilton, there is no text message or email of him making these promises. My man is an OG. My man's been doing it a long time, And he basically did not put in writing anywhere, I owe you this much to, I think, to protect himself. But that is where lawyers come in. That's where an agent comes in. Let me say this really quick. I think that there is a misrepresentation of NIL agents in the public. Okay. And I've told this story a million times, but I bring it up because listen, if you're an elite college athlete, if you're Caleb Williams at USC, if you're Bryce Young at Alabama, if you're Cooper Flagg at Duke this year, you obviously have great representation. Okay. But the counter to that, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of agents that don't have a lot of experience. I've told this story before. A few years ago at the Final Four, I was basically, somebody asked me, hey, can you sit in on a phone call? You know, it's an NIL deal. We just kind of want your perspective on it. I said, okay, cool. So I sit down on the call, listen to the whole deal, whatever. Agent is on the phone with the company, this and that. I bring it up because talk to the agent after, hey, happy to help, this and that. And I said to him, I said, hey, we're throwing a little party at the, on whatever day. You should swing down if you want to. Would love to meet you in person, blah, 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 blah. I bring it up because this agent literally says to me, he goes, I'd love to, but I'm not 21. Like, I can't get into the bar. And what I realized, this kid was like 19 years old. He was a hustler. Credit to him. But that is who these schools and these collectives are dealing with. So it's not just the schools, but sometimes it's the agents as well not having experience. Don't negotiate something if you can't get it in writing. By the way, to all the parents, I'm sorry, no disrespect to all the hustlers that are 19, 20, 21 years old. Get yourself a real lawyer. Just look over the contract. If you want to take the word of a coach, that's fine. But just get an adult to look over the contract. Lastly, let me say this. I don't want to be too negative about this because at the end of the day, listen, I think there's a lot of negativity in college sports right now about where we are and where we're going. And what I would say is this is year 3 of NIL. It looks a lot different than even year 2. It looks a lot different than even year 1. And it's going to look a lot different 3 years from now than it does now. Remember, we obviously have the house case coming, which basically means the schools can pay players themselves. And so to me, that is a variable. That is an X factor. The truth of the matter is you're not going to have these crazy collectives and who's actually running it and where's the money coming from. You are going to be able to do things directly with the school. I think it's going to put a lot of stress on the schools, but I think it will help kind of put things above board. And I know that there's a lot of negativity, but I think we are getting to a place now where this is actually something, it's going in the right direction. And I've said it a million times, but in October, I actually spoke at an NIL panel in Vegas. My buddy Ryan Silver, AAU extraordinaire, runs a bunch of businesses out here in California. He put on an amazing NIL event. And the thing that I took away from that, there were a lot of lawyers there, a lot of collective people, a lot of ADs. And they all said, look, we're not where we need to be, but it's not, it's going in the right direction. We're going to get it figured out. We are still in the infant stages of the NIL era. So I'm not saying if you're one of those 6 Florida State players that you feel good that you got gypped allegedly out of $250,000, but I think we are getting to a better place where things are a little bit more regulated. It took some time. It is going to take more time, but we are getting to the right place. Really quickly before we get out of here. So this is our final episode of 2024. The next time I see you will be 2025. And we obviously, like I said, to lead the show, we're going to do a lot more college hoops going forward because obviously, look, college football is ramping down. Many of you know me specifically for college hoops. And so what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes to wrap our final show of 2024 and talk about what I believe to be the biggest stories in college basketball going into 2025. In other words, what are the biggest stories between now and April when a national champion is crowned? Not going to talk about AJ DeBonsa, not going to talk about the Boozer twins, not even going to talk about what I assume will be a wild portal season in April and May. But instead, I want to give you what I believe to be the 10 biggest stories in college basketball. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. The graphics are lacking a little bit today. Producer Matt will be back for our show on Thursday, recapping the college football playoff. But let's go ahead and dive into, in my opinion, the 10 biggest stories in college football, in college basketball heading into 2025. The first one, number one story in college basketball heading into 2025 is the SEC set to be the best conference we have ever seen in college basketball. Okay. So I've talked about this quite a bit. I think anyone who loves college basketball is kind of monitoring this story, but the SEC is trending right now to potentially be the best conference we have ever had in college basketball history. It sounds hyperbolic. I promise you it is not. Okay. The bottom line is if you just look at the raw numbers, it's incredible. First of all, new AP poll just came out a few hours ago. There are currently 10 of the 25 teams in the top 25 are from the SEC, 5 of the top 10. Oh, by the way, 7 of the top 13 teams all in the SEC. It's also worth noting, by the way, we put up the stat a few weeks ago. Jared Burson, ESPN Stats and Info, said that the SEC had already set a record for most wins against ranked teams in the out of portion of the schedule by one conference. They are beating and destroying everybody. But I think this is the most telling stat on how good this league is. And it's good to me, top, bottom, and middle. I think that's the difference, right? There's a lot of conferences that have a good top 2 or 3. There's some that have a top 5 or 6. The SEC literally right now, 1 through 16 is awesome. And this is the stat that I think is going to blow you away. Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology. How about this? Of the 16 teams in the SEC, 13 were projected to make the NCAA tournament. But here's actually the crazy part. Vanderbilt was in the first 4 out. LSU was in the next 4 out, meaning that 15 of the 16 SEC teams are basically either comfortably in the field, or basically a win away from being in Joe Lunardi's next bracketology. So it is incredible. It is unreal. It is unprecedented. I don't think the SEC is going to end up with 13. Certainly don't think they're going to end up with 15. But do I think 11 or 12 is absolutely in play? Of course. 11, of course, is the record as far as I can tell. Big East 2011. Shout out Kemba Walker. Only conference to get 11 in one NCAA tournament. Let's keep it going. The number 2 story, in my opinion, heading into college hoops into 2024, 25, really 25, is basically, can anybody beat Auburn? Okay, and if you haven't been following college hoops religiously so far this season, Auburn, in my opinion, is by far the best team in college basketball in 2024, 2025 right now, okay? So as we record here, Tennessee is the number 1 team in the country. But Auburn is sitting at 11-1 in college basketball. And this is all you need to know about Auburn. Their only loss was at Duke in a game where they actually led early in the game, couldn't hold on. Iowa State was the only other game that was close. But here's the crazy part with Auburn. Look at some of the scores of their other games. Beat North Carolina. North Carolina's pretty good by 13 points. Beat Memphis, a top 25 team right now, by 24. Beat Ohio State by 38. Remember, Ohio State then beat Kentucky a week later. Beat Purdue by 18. Beat Houston. This team is beating the crap out of teams. They are dominant. Now, look, obviously, in the SEC, they're not going to go 17-1 in league play or anything like that. The league is too tough. But I do think you look at this team. They are, in my opinion, by far the best team in college basketball. I think they're trending towards an SEC regular season title, a number 1 seed, Janai Broome, National Player of the Year. Credit to Auburn. Let me just read those numbers to you again. Beat Memphis by 24, currently in the top 25. Beat Ohio State by 38, Purdue by 18, North Carolina by 13. Credit to the Auburn Tigers. Auburn was the Maui Invitational champion. Let's move on to number 3, which is UConn's pursuit of a national championship, a 3rd straight title, a 3-peat realistic? So why I lump Auburn and UConn together, of course, they both played in the Maui Invitational. UConn goes 0-3, Auburn goes 3-0. But it's also worth noting with UConn on the mainland is 10-0. UConn also outside of the Maui Invitational is 10-0. So was it a bad couple days in Hawaii? Is this a flawed team? Whatever. Let's go ahead and discuss, because it is worth noting, since they got back from Maui, this is a team that is 6-0, 2 Big East wins already, 2 true road wins at Texas, at Butler, and also beat Gonzaga on a neutral and beat Baylor at home. And so when I look at UConn, listen, I will say this. I don't think they should be deemed one of the favorites necessarily right now. I think when I look at UConn, they are a different kind of team than the last couple of years. Last couple of years, they were so gifted offensively. Jordan Hawkins 2-3 years ago, Adama Sanogo, Tristan Newton, Donovan Clingan last year, Cam Spencer. This team to me is more of an old school Hurley team. They're great on defense. They play really hard, and that's been the thing about the last 2 years. They've played really hard with skill. This team, I don't think, is quite as skilled, but they're starting to play with that Hurley toughness to them, and I think they're going to go on a run here. You look at the Big East. The Big East, once you get past UConn and Marquette, is pretty sketchy. St. John's is 11-2, but even in their wins, they kind of always start off slow. They beat Providence. They had to rally in their Big East or their second Big East game against Providence right before Christmas. And so it's not to say that St. John's is bad. It's just to say that I think they're flawed. I think Georgetown's actually kind of an interesting team right now. Georgetown, Marquette, St. John's, UConn, all four of those teams are 2-0 in league play. But I just bring it up because I think UConn is very much going to be in position. I think it's going to be a little back against the wall. I don't think they're one of the 10 best teams or anything I've seen, but I trust Dan Hurley. I trust the program. They're getting better every game. It's worth noting. I think it's a little early to look at quad 1, quad 2, quad 3 wins, but they have as many quad 1 wins as anybody in college basketball. So credit to UConn. They're turning things around, even if I think it's still a little early for a potential three-peat legitimate conversation. Let's keep it going with number 4. Listen, two guys that will, fair or not, and I know both fan bases are going to be mad at me for doing this, but will be forever tied in history. John Calipari and Mark Pope. How do both teams end their how do both guys end their first season at their new schools? Mark Pope, of course, took over for John Calipari at Kentucky, and John Calipari is at Arkansas. Now, it is worth noting, Arkansas is playing on Monday night against Oakland of all teams, so this could be a very outdated segment very quickly. But let's assume Arkansas wins. Both teams will enter SEC play, very likely sitting at 11-2 overall. Kentucky, by the way, plays New Year's Eve day against Brown at home. So basically, both teams have one game left heading into league play. Both teams very likely will be, hopefully, if they're not 11-2 going into league play, we're going to have a bonus pod here, because that means one of them would have either lost to Oakland or Brown. But I think what this really says to me is I'm just curious to see how both teams finish the season. To Mark Pope's credit, listen, I think it's gone as well as you possibly could have expected. I don't think you could have expected much better than 10-2. You beat Gonzaga, you beat Duke. You've really played one bad game. That was the Ohio State game right before the New Year, or right before the Christmas break. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it's a reality. And then from Arkansas, I think a lot of people threw a lot of dirt on that program early. But since they got back Jonas Adu, they've been a different team. Beat Michigan at Madison Square Garden. The last couple of games, they have basically destroyed teams. And I think it is worth noting, they are a different team when they have big men in the middle that could actually play. Trevin Brazile was hurt. Jonas Adu was hurt. The last 3 games that they have played, they beat Michigan on a neutral. They beat Central Arkansas by 25, and then they beat North Carolina A&T by 28. And so I'm not saying we should throw a parade for beating North Carolina, A&T, Central Arkansas, and Michigan on a neutral, but they do feel like a different team with Jonas Adu. Fascinated to see how these two teams respond and bounce back. By the way, interesting SEC openers for both. Arkansas goes on the road to the number 1 ranked Tennessee Vols to open SEC play on Saturday. Kentucky will play Florida at home. Florida is undefeated as of right now. That will be an 11 a.m. Eastern start time at Rupp Arena on Saturday. So make sure you get your coffee for that one. Number 5 story of college hoops heading into 2025. Cooper Flagg. I'm just really interested what becomes of the Cooper Flagg narrative, okay? First off, having a pretty good freshman year. He no longer leads his team in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. Only points, rebounds, assists, and blocks. So clearly he's fallen apart. But in all seriousness, I think about the Cooper Flagg story. I'll be transparent. I kind of thought this was going to be Zion-esque in terms of interest, especially after he played with that Team USA select team, was playing against the Olympic team this summer, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, etc. I don't really feel like we've had that moment yet. I think you could argue Cooper Flagg's biggest moment was the turnover against Kentucky late in the game, the 2 turnovers late in the game against Kentucky, including the one that Mark Pope told you was going to happen. And so I just bring it up because he's a great player, but I don't feel like he has had that moment yet. And I'm curious if and when it comes, because now you're heading into an ACC that transparently, ACC ain't very good right now. ACC, I know Lenardi has 5 teams in, but you get past Duke, it's a lot of question marks. Clemson's okay, but they've already lost 3 games. Pitt's okay, but do we really trust them? North Carolina, I actually think, is playing better, but they're sitting at 8-5 right now. Louisville's all sorts of banged up. Intriguing game, by the way, for Duke. Second game of ACC play this week. They will play New Year's Eve day against Virginia Tech. Then they go to SMU. Remember, SMU, of course, is in the ACC. Andy Enfield is the head coach, left USC, which led the whole trickle-down effect. Musselman goes to USC. Cal goes to Arkansas. Pope goes to Kentucky. SMU quietly sitting at 10-2, 11-2 right now, heading into their New Year's or their game on Saturday against Duke. So that'll be a really interesting one. But I'm just curious, like, when does it really click for Duke? When does it really click for Cooper Flagg? Does he have that super viral moment where it's like, okay, this is his moment in college hoops? Curious to see if and when it comes. Number 6. So Cooper Flagg is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. People are going to try to argue otherwise. I think it's going to be Cooper Flagg. He's the youngest player in college basketball, and he's going to be a first-team All-American. But the number 2 and number 3 picks both might miss the NCAA tournament. This to me is very interesting. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey are both at Rutgers, and Rutgers is kind of struggling right now. They're at 7-5. They lost to Princeton about a week ago. Remember, they lost at Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State, that was a return game for Ace Bailey, who is from the Atlanta area. And so when I look at this season, I think it's a couple interesting narratives about those two guys. They choose a different school, a unique school. Obviously, Dylan Harper, his ties to Rutgers, his older brother played there. But what makes it interesting is, what if these two guys miss the NCAA tournament? 1, I don't think it impacts their draft stock. It doesn't. But 2, I'm just curious, They chose the non-traditional path of not going to Duke, not going to Kentucky, not going to Arizona, not playing for John Calipari, not playing for Hubert Davis. Does that change guys' decisions in the future? I know AJ DeBonsa is going to BYU, but I think that's a little bit of a unique one-off situation there. But does it change people's decisions to do this? But 2, is this really a way to build teams in college basketball in 2024, 2025? Because you have 2 lottery picks, no doubt about it, lottery picks, potential top 5 picks, likely top 5 picks, and you're probably going to miss the NCAA tournament. So I think that's just something to watch going forward. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are uniquely gifted players, but I think both right now are trending to miss the tournament. Rutgers is in the Big Ten, number 7 on my list. Who's the best team in the Big Ten? 18 teams in that league right now, and I'm going to be quick through these next few ones because I got to get out of here. I actually got to go do Fox Sports Radio, but I bring it up because who's the best team in the Big Ten right now? Oregon dominated out of conference play, beat Alabama to win that Players Era Invitational. They're really good. UCLA, I just saw in person against Gonzaga. I was at that UCLA game in Inglewood on Saturday. Awesome game. I think UCLA might actually be the best team. Purdue's pretty good, but I'm not really sold on them. They had a great win against Alabama at home, but on a neutral against Auburn, they lost. At Marquette, they lost. I don't think this is a team that's going like, what they go 18-2 last year. I don't think they're going like 16-4, 15-5 this year. So I'm just curious, who's the best team? Is it UCLA? I think it might be Illinois. Illinois to me is a very fascinating team. Beat Arkansas in the out of conference play. Easily could have beaten Tennessee, which was number 1 and is number 1 in the country. Illinois to me is interesting. UCLA is interesting, as I believe those are the top 2 teams that I've seen in the Big Ten. Wisconsin with John Tanji playing very well as well. Number 8, staying in the Big Ten. Mike Woodson. Is this it for Mike Woodson? Okay, so Mike Woodson in Indiana. So I mentioned there's 13 teams from the SEC in Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology. The Big Ten has 10. Indiana is not one of them. Why is Indiana not one of them? Well, they're 10-3 overall, but their 3 losses: destroyed by Louisville, destroyed by Gonzaga, destroyed by Nebraska on the road. Their best win in the out-of-conference portion of play, maybe South Carolina, maybe Providence with a banged-up team without Bryce Hopkins. So I just bring it up because they don't have a great resume going into Big Ten play, and it feels like things are starting to get a little weird for Mike Woodson, okay? Remember, this was, if you missed this story over the weekend, wild story. This is where we're missing producer Matt, because I'd love to get this picture up. But so Umar Ballo, literally like 7 foot, 280 pounds, was seen at a bar at 1 a.m. The night before a game on Sunday against Winthrop. Why it's interesting, he did not play against Winthrop. Did DMP coach his decision? Mike Woodson would not address it after. I'll be honest. It's kind of hard to miss a 7-foot, 280-pound guy at the bar. And I can tell you, Indiana fans, I was kind of surprised by the reaction on social media. They're like, this is an unserious program. We're paying all these guys all sorts of NIL money. They're not taking this crap seriously. So I just bring it up because I think Mike Woodson could be on the hot seat. I think he's definitely on the hot seat. If he misses the tournament, he's out. I think even if he makes the tournament, but it's like a weird, 17-11. Well, it can't be 17-11 because, whatever, 22-12 or something, loses in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, loses in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think there's a possibility that he could be gone. But Mike Woodson, interesting story there. That's number 8. Number 9, just who's next in terms of the coaches that are retiring. Woodson, I think, would get fired. But Jim Larinaga just retired. Tony Bennett retired before the season. We didn't do a Jim Larinaga story. Listen, I thought it was kind of tacky that he blamed NIL. It's like, dude, your program was kind of the king of NIL for a while. Now you're blaming NIL. Didn't love that. But I just bring it up because who's next? Mark Few, I'm hearing increasingly, is just kind of like, don't really love the state of college basketball right now. My team isn't dominating. Could he be next? I think there's a possibility that maybe Leonard Hamilton, after what happened this week, could be next. I think somebody big could be out soon. Maybe Tom Izzo. I don't know. And then number 10 is just, what are we not ready for? Is it an NIL story like this? Is it a transfer portal story? I don't know, but I cannot wait to find out. All right, I'll tell you what, I got to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Thank you for listening. Really quickly, I'm going to roll, but I just want to say the numbers for 2024 were insane. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but numbers were up like 40% on YouTube. Maybe it was like 60%. I got to look it up. They were up like 40% on YouTube. Over 4 million of you consumed the show, closer to 4.5 million of you over the course of 2024. So I cannot thank you all enough for your support, and I cannot wait to see what 2025 brings. Time for me to go. Appreciate all of you. I'll see you soon. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick. You F-Ed. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back Thursday.